In the year 1839, deep within the plantations of Georgia, there existed a woman of wealth and social prominence, whose daily rituals shocked even the most seasoned observers of Southern aristocracy, for she was known to bathe naked in the company of enslaved men every morning, and this peculiar act, though whispered about in secrecy, became a symbol of the twisted power dynamics and moral corruption that thrived within the institution of slavery. The woman herself was a figure of both fascination and fear, possessing a beauty that had aged into arrogance and a wealth that gave her absolute authority over every soul who lived on her land. Her estate stretched far beyond the horizon, dotted with rows of cotton fields and the cries of enslaved workers who labored from dawn to dusk beneath the unforgiving southern sun. Yet behind the grand columns of her mansion, a darker and more intimate tyranny unfolded each day. She summoned a group of young enslaved men to her private bathing quarters, a marble chamber built with European luxury, where fountains of cool water spilled endlessly. As if mocking the thirst of those who toiled outside, she would undress without hesitation, standing before them, as though their eyes carried no judgment, only obedience and fear. The enslaved men chosen for this ritual were forced to participate in silence, their bodies trembling not from desire, but from terror. For any hesitation or perceived disobedience could result in brutal punishment. They were, stripped not only of their freedom but of their dignity, reduced to silent witnesses of her vanity and madness. She claimed these daily baths cleansed her spirit from evil, as though proximity to the enslaved men drew out impurity from her soul. But in truth it was a grotesque display of control, one that reminded every participant that she owned not just their labor, but their very humanity to her. These men were not individuals, but instruments through which she reaffirmed her dominance over the world that had made her powerful. The whispers among the slaves told of how she would linger in the water gazing at her reflection, as if searching for signs of youth. Long lost, some said she spoke to herself. Others said she wept. Yet all agreed that her ritual carried a madness born from too much unchecked power. In those moments, the line between mistress and monster blurred entirely outside the walls of her mansion. She portrayed herself as a refined woman of culture, hosting gatherings with visiting planters and ministers who praised her grace and charity. She donated to churches and presented herself as a paragon of Southern womanhood. Yet within the sanctuary of her bath, she enacted a perverse theater of power, one that revealed the sickness at the heart of slavery, a system that corrupted even those who believed themselves righteous for the enslaved men. There was no escape from the shame or the silence after each ritual. They were sent back to the fields expected to labor, as if nothing had occurred, their pain invisible. Their voices unheard, each carried the weight of humiliation, knowing that their bodies had been used not for pleasure, but for the cruel satisfaction of reminding them they were less than human. This daily act stripped away the boundaries between master and slave, yet not in liberation, but in degradation. It served as a grim reminder that slavery was not merely a system of forced labor, but a complete erasure of personhood. The woman's wealth had been built upon their suffering, yet she sought spiritual purification from the very people she oppressed. Her need for control and her thirst for power were endless, consuming her until she became enslaved by her own desires. In time, the stories of her ritual spread across neighboring plantations, whispered in hushed tones among both slaves and overseers. But no one dared confront her, for she was protected by her class, her gender, and the silence of those who feared her wrath. The enslaved people prayed for deliverance, yet none came. Their only comfort lay in their shared understanding that even the mistress who claimed to be pure was rotting from within. Her daily bath symbolized not cleansing but contamination. It was a ritual born of guilt and loneliness, an attempt to wash away sins that could never be absolved by water alone. She believed herself untouchable, yet in truth she was drowning in the very darkness she had created. Her actions revealed how absolute power can deform the human spirit, turning faith into superstition, compassion into cruelty, and love into possession. As the years passed, her beauty faded, and her name slipped into obscurity. But the memory of her cruelty endured among the descendants of those who had suffered under her rule. To them, she remained not a lady of grace but a specter of the past, a reminder of the hidden horrors that festered behind the facades of Southern gentility. Her story stands as a testament to the depths of depravity that unchecked authority can breed, and how the pursuit of control over others ultimately leads to one's own moral decay. In the silence of those marble walls where water once flowed freely, the echoes of her cruelty linger like ghosts, a warning from history that no power built upon the suffering of others can remain pure forever. The woman who lived upon that Georgia plantation in 1839 believed herself to be a vessel of refinement and moral superiority. Yet her daily actions betrayed a truth so disturbing that it shattered every illusion of virtue she claimed for herself. She would rise before dawn, her servants dressing her in silk robes before she made her way to the marble chamber where the enslaved men awaited her trembling and silent. Her ritual was described as spiritual purification, but beneath that pretense lay a dark obsession with control power and the destruction of the human spirit. She saw herself as a guardian of divine order, and believed that through her baths she could cleanse the wickedness of the flesh by confronting temptation, face to face. She imagined that standing naked before those she enslaved would affirm her sanctity over their supposed savagery, and that through their presence she could test her purity. But the truth was far more perverse, for what she performed was not an act of faith but of dominance. It revealed the sickness that festered within her mind, and the culture that allowed it to thrive. The enslaved men chosen for her bath were stripped of their identity, reduced to instruments in her daily theater of superiority. Their silence was demanded, their gaze forbidden, their suffering ignored. She looked upon them not as human beings but as reflections of her own twisted righteousness, and in their forced submission she found reassurance that her power remained absolute. This ritual was her way of conquering both her fears and her desires, for within her heart there existed a conflict between the morality she preached and the cruelty she practiced. She had been raised to believe that the enslaved were lesser creatures, yet she could not deny the haunting presence of their humanity, which stood as a mirror to her own corruption. So she turned their existence into ritual, a performance that allowed her to confront her own darkness. Without ever admitting its presence to others within those steamy marble walls, her words would echo in soft murmurs, prayers that blended with the sound of running water, as if she sought forgiveness from a God who refused to listen. She spoke of purity yet bathed in sin. She called herself virtuous yet thrived on humiliation. She demanded obedience while her own heart was enslaved by vanity. Those around her either looked away or justified her behavior as eccentricity, for in the society of the Old South, the mistress of a plantation could do no wrong. Her cruelty was masked by etiquette. Her madness hidden behind lace curtains. She was both saint and sinner. In a world that worshipped appearances above truth, this daily ritual revealed not only her fractured mind but also the hypocrisy of a culture that allowed such horrors to unfold. Beneath the guise of gentility, she would emerge from the bath, each morning refreshed, not in spirit but in delusion, believing herself renewed as the enslaved men returned to their work broken and hollow. Her household carried on as though nothing had happened. The other slaves whispered of her growing instability. They saw in her eyes a hunger that no wealth could satisfy, and a loneliness that devoured her from within. Each day she sought to wash away the invisible stains of guilt that clung to her, but the more she bathed, the deeper those stains sank into her soul. She lived in constant contradiction, a woman who claimed divine grace, yet indulged in acts of dehumanization. Her need for power disguised itself as piety. Her cruelty masqueraded as ritual. The enslaved men became symbols of everything she denied within herself. Their silence reminded her of the truth she could not face, that her authority was not born of virtue but of violence and fear. She stood above them naked and vulnerable, yet wielded a power that made her untouchable. Her baths were not an escape, but a confession, a desperate attempt to cleanse herself of the knowledge that she was complicit in the suffering that sustained her world. And though she never spoke of her guilt, it haunted her in dreams and in the stillness of night, when the echoes of her own cruelty returned to whisper her name over time. Her rituals grew longer and stranger, as if she believed that through repetition she could rewrite her sins. She began to speak to the enslaved men, though not as equals, but as vessels of her imagined redemption. She asked them questions they dared not answer. She touched the water as if it held sacred power, yet nothing could purify what she had become. She was a prisoner of her own making, trapped within a cycle of self-deception and moral decay. And though the world around her continued to honor her wealth and lineage, she was rotting from the inside out. Her baths became less about cleansing and more about drowning the memory of every lash, every cry, every stolen life that had built the empire she ruled. She thought herself a lady of grace, yet her name became a curse whispered among those she tormented. Her story is one of madness disguised as faith, cruelty hidden beneath the veil of sanctity, and the ultimate collapse of a soul consumed by the very power it sought to control. In her desperate attempt to purify herself, she revealed the truth that no ritual can absolve the sin of seeing others as less than human. She died believing she had mastered her demons. But history remembers her only as a warning that those who claim righteousness while wielding oppression will always be haunted by the echoes of their own lies. The story of the plantation lady who bathed naked with enslaved men each day in Georgia in 1839 stands as a chilling testament to how absolute power without accountability corrupts the mind and soul until every act becomes a performance of cruelty. Disguised as privilege, her ritual, though shrouded in secrecy, was not merely an eccentric indulgence, but a symptom of a society built upon domination, where one human being could believe herself ordained to command the lives and bodies of others. Her daily bath symbolized the deepest rot within that world, a rot that thrived under the illusion of civility and divine order, for in those moments of exposure and command, she believed she was above consequence that no God would punish her for, desecrating the dignity of those she enslaved. She walked among her peers as a lady of grace, yet behind the walls of her mansion, she exercised a godlike authority over flesh and spirit. Her behavior reflected not passion, but pathology, the result of a system that taught her from birth that her whiteness, her gender, and her wealth made her untouchable. She had never known restraint nor empathy, for she lived in a world that rewarded cruelty, so long as it maintained the illusion of order. Every morning as the sun rose over the cotton fields, she enacted the same grotesque ceremony, calling forth the young enslaved men who had no choice but to obey. They would stand trembling before her as she undressed without shame, stepping into the cool water that glimmered like polished silver. The room smelled of oils and fear. Her voice, soft yet commanding, cut through the silence like a blade. She told herself this ritual kept her soul clean, that she was washing away sin, not committing it, but deep inside some buried part of her must have known that she was defiling something sacred. For every eye that looked upon her was filled not with desire, but with humiliation and terror. Each man who entered that room lost a piece of himself, not by choice but by force, as if his very existence was reduced to a reflection of her power. They were stripped not only of clothing but of personhood, turned into symbols of submission, their lives already bound by chains now further enslaved by the madness of a woman who mistook cruelty for control. She was not alone in her delusion, for her society had crafted her into this monster, taught her that dominance was purity and obedience was virtue. Every sermon, every law, every whispered tale reinforced the lie that she was righteous, and that those she commanded were born to serve, and so she believed that bathing with them was not sin, but ceremony, not exploitation, but enlightenment. She thought herself enlightened, yet her actions revealed a deepening darkness, for no heart that understands love could inflict such humiliation upon another. She saw herself as a priestess, purifying the world through ritual. But she was only cleansing her guilt with the tears of the powerless. Those enslaved men returned each day to the fields, their silence heavier than chains, and though no mark showed upon their skin, the wound ran deeper than any whip could carve. It was the wound of being seen not as a man, but as an object, a reflection of another's madness in their suffering. The plantation revealed its true nature, not as a house of order, but as a theater of cruelty, where the powerful played God and the powerless played ghosts, unseen, unheard, forgotten. The lady herself grew consumed by her. Ritual for power once tasted demands more each day. She lingered longer in the bath, staring into her reflection as if searching for forgiveness. Yet the more she stared, the less she recognized herself. She saw beauty and wealth, but beneath them lay emptiness, the kind that no water could fill. Her ritual became obsession. Her obsession became torment. and soon even those closest to her began to fear the change they saw in her eyes. She spoke less to people and more to shadows. She wandered the halls at night muttering prayers for redemption, though she could not name the sin she sought to wash away the enslaved people. Whispered that her soul was cursed, that she had angered the spirits of those she defiled, and that no baptism, no holy water, no whispered prayer could cleanse what she had done, and in a way they were right, for her power had not purified her. It had devoured her, turning her into a relic of the cruelty that birthed her. In her final years, she became a recluse, hiding from the world that once adored her. The baths continued, though her strength waned. She would sit in the cold water, shivering, speaking to no one, as if waiting for an answer that never came when death finally claimed her. It was said she was found near the pool, pale and lifeless, her reflection frozen upon the surface like a warning. Her wealth could not save her. Her prayers could not absolve her, and the slaves who buried her did so in silence, offering no tears for a woman who had taken so much from them. Her story did not survive in the proud letters of planters or the journals of Southern ladies, but in the whispered memories of those who endured her rule. For to them she was not a figure of grace, but of horror, a symbol of how power unchecked can twist the soul until cruelty feels like duty and sin feels like salvation. Her tale endures as a reminder that no system built upon domination can escape the poison. It creates, for every act of humiliation dehumanizes both the victim and the perpetrator. She bathed daily, seeking to cleanse herself, yet with every bath, she sank deeper into filth until the woman who once believed herself pure became a ghost of her own corruption, a reflection of the evil she refused to see.